I'm Amelia, 29 female. I live in a 3-bedroom house that I bought with my own money, in a quiet suburban neighborhood that I chose for its peace. For the last 6 years, I've worked tirelessly as a data analyst, climbing the ladder to a senior position that finally gave me the financial security my parents never had. But my peaceful sanctuary recently became a pressure cooker of entitlement and disrespect, all because I made the mistake of trying to help my family. This is the story of how my parents and my golden child sister tried to take everything from me, starting with my own bedroom, and how I took back my house, my finances, and my life. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The decision to invite my family to live with me was born from a cocktail of guilt, pity, and a lifetime of conditioning that told me it was my duty. It all started 8 months ago. My dad, David, was forced into early retirement from his sales manager job. The company was restructuring, a corporate euphemism for cutting costs by shedding older, more expensive employees. At 59, with a mortgage on their small, aging house and very little in savings, panic set in. My mom, Susan, had retired from her receptionist job a few years prior, expecting to live comfortably on my dad's income until his pension kicked in. Suddenly, their financial plan had evaporated. I received the frantic call on a Tuesday evening. I was just wrapping up a complex data model, my brain humming with numbers and code. My mom's voice was thin and frayed with anxiety. "Amelia, we don't know what to do," she'd cried. "They're selling the house. We can't afford the payments. We have nowhere to go." My heart sank. Despite our complicated history, the thought of my parents being homeless was unbearable. Growing up, my relationship with them was always strained, largely because of my younger sister, Chloe. Chloe was the artist, the free spirit, the beautiful one. I was the practical, quiet, and reliable one. My achievements, scholarships, academic awards, a stable career were met with polite, lukewarm praise. Chloe's minor accomplishments, like landing a non-speaking role in a local commercial or getting a new yoga certification, were celebrated with lavish dinners and effusive posts on social media. She was the sun. I was the planet orbiting her, useful for my gravitational pull, but never the center of the universe. This dynamic meant that my parents had poured a significant amount of their limited resources into Chloe's dreams. Acting classes, headshots, endless yoga retreats, and covering her rent in a trendy downtown apartment she couldn't afford on her own. As a part-time yoga instructor and aspiring actress, her income was sporadic and negligible. Now, with my dad's job gone, the Chloe fund was officially dry. So when my mom called, I knew the unspoken question hanging in the air. I had the space. My 3-bedroom house felt palatial for just one person. I had a guest room with an en-suite bathroom and another smaller room I used as a home office. "You can stay with me," I offered, the words leaving my mouth before I could fully process their weight. "Just for a little while, until you get back on your feet." The relief in my mother's voice was palpable. A week later, they arrived. My dad's truck, packed to the brim with boxes, was followed by Chloe's little convertible, also full. I was surprised to see her. "Oh, didn't I mention?" my mom said breezily as she hugged me. With us not being able to help her anymore, Chloe had to give up her apartment. It just makes sense for her to stay here too. It didn't just make sense to me, but I was cornered. Arguing on the driveway with all their belongings on display felt cruel. So I swallowed my surprise and showed them to their rooms. My parents took the guest room with the en-suite. It was a lovely room, overlooking the garden. I had set up Chloe in my home office, which was the smallest of the 3 bedrooms. I bought a new daybed and a small dresser for her, clearing out half the closet. I figured my work-from-home setup could be moved to a corner of my own large master bedroom. It was a sacrifice, but it was temporary. Or so I thought. The first month was an adjustment. I tried to be accommodating. I laid out the ground rules as gently as I could. I would cover the mortgage, utilities, and property taxes. That was my contribution. I asked that they contribute to the groceries and household supplies. My dad, humbled by his job loss, agreed readily. My mom nodded, though her smile was tight. Chloe just shrugged, scrolling through her phone as if the conversation was about as interesting as a weather report. It quickly became clear that their definition of contributing was different from mine. The grocery bill, which I paid, tripled. My mom cooked, but she only cooked their favorite foods, heavy, rich meals I rarely ate. My healthy yogurts, fruits, and vegetables would be pushed to the back of the fridge to make way for my dad's beer and Chloe's endless supply of kombucha and oat milk for her lattes. When I brought up the grocery agreement, my mom would say, "Oh, I picked up some bread and milk yesterday," as if that squared a $400 weekly bill. The house, once my pristine sanctuary, became cluttered and loud. Chloe's yoga mats and acting scripts littered the living room. My dad watched television at a deafening volume all day. My mom rearranged my kitchen, putting things in more logical places so I could never find anything. They treated the house not as a place they were graciously allowed to stay in, but as their own. They were guests who had forgotten they were guests. My workday, which had once been a peaceful and productive affair in my dedicated office, was now a constant struggle for quiet. I had moved my desk into a corner of my master bedroom, but the door seemed to be no deterrent. Chloe would burst in without knocking to ask if I'd seen her favorite leggings. My mom would pop her head in to ask what I wanted for dinner while I was in the middle of a video conference. My performance at work began to suffer. I was distracted, exhausted, and my focus was shot. I had to start going into the office 3 days a week just to get some peace, which defeated the purpose of my work-from-home arrangement. But the most grating part was Chloe's complete lack of gratitude or effort. At 24, she acted like a teenager. She slept until noon, spent hours on her phone, and left a trail of dirty dishes and clothes in her wake. She made no real effort to find a more stable job. When I cautiously asked her about her job search one evening, she rolled her eyes. "It's hard to find acting work, Amelia. You wouldn't understand. It's not like your boring desk job." My boring desk job was paying for the roof over her head, the food she ate, and the Wi-Fi she used to scroll through casting calls she never applied for. The resentment in my chest grew from a small ember to a slow-burning fire. They had been with me for 3 months, and there was no sign of them making any plans to leave. My dad's job search was half-hearted at best. He seemed to have settled into a life of retired leisure. They weren't just staying with me, they were building a new life for themselves in my home, on my dime. My generosity wasn't a temporary lifeline, it was their new permanent reality. The house was no longer my home. It was a hotel where I was the sole paying customer and the head of housekeeping, and the worst was yet to come. The breaking point arrived on a Saturday afternoon, about 5 months into their stay. It was a rare, beautiful spring day, and I had spent the morning gardening, trying to reclaim a small piece of my sanity in the soil. I came inside, hands covered in dirt, feeling a fleeting sense of peace. That peace shattered the moment I walked into the kitchen. My mother, father, and Chloe were sitting around the kitchen island, talking in hushed, serious tones. The moment I entered, they fell silent. The air was thick with conspiracy. "What's going on?" I asked, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. My mom, Susan, took on the role of spokesperson. She smoothed down her apron, a gesture I knew meant she was about to deliver some kind of verdict. "Amelia, honey, we need to talk to you about something." "Okay," I said slowly, moving to the sink to wash my hands. "It's about the living arrangements," she began, her voice syrupy sweet. "We are so grateful for you letting us stay here. You have been a lifesaver." I waited. Compliments from my mother were always a prelude to a request. "It's just that, well, Chloe is having a very hard time," she continued, gesturing towards my sister, who immediately put on her best sad puppy face. "Her room is so small. There's barely any natural light. It's affecting her creative energy. She can't practice her yoga or run her lines properly, and it's really not fair to her." I stared at her, dumbfounded. Not fair to her? I gave up my home office for her. It's a bedroom. It's more than what she'd have if she weren't living here for free. My dad, David, cleared his throat. Now, Amelia, your mother has a point. The girl needs her space. She's trying to build a career. You, on the other hand, have that huge master bedroom all to yourself. I felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over me. I knew where this was going, but my brain refused to accept it. What are you suggesting? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. It was Chloe who spoke next, her tone dripping with a practiced, gentle entitlement. We were thinking, since you're barely even here anymore, you're at the office so much, it would make more sense if we swapped rooms. You can take my room and I'll take the master. I could Rhea. Ellie used the en-suite bathroom for getting ready for auditions, and the big windows are perfect for my self-tapes. I looked from her smug face to my mother's expectant one, to my father's nod of agreement. They had discussed this. They had planned this. They had all agreed that the person who owned the house, who paid for everything, should be relegated to the smallest, darkest room so the golden child could be more comfortable. The sheer audacity of it left me speechless for a long moment. I just stared at them, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound in the room. They actually believed this was a reasonable request. They saw my home, my possessions, my personal space, not as mine, but as a communal resource to be distributed according to Chloe's needs. No, I finally said. The word was small, but it felt like a cannon blast in the silent kitchen. Chloe's face fell, my mother's smile faltered. What do you mean no? My mom asked, her tone shifting from sweet to sharp. I mean no, I repeated, my voice stronger now. Absolutely not. I am not giving up my bedroom. This is my house. The master bedroom is my room. This is not a negotiation. My mother stood up, her face flushing with anger. Amelia, don't be so selfish. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. I am paying for this entire house. I am paying for the food you eat. I gave up my office so you could all live here. What exactly have you done for me, other than treat me like a live-in ATM and a hotel manager? That is a disgusting thing to say, my dad boomed, his face turning red. We are your family. Family helps each other out. Your sister needs this. A good sister would want to help. A good sister wouldn't demand the keys to the castle she didn't build. I shot back, my own anger now boiling over. And good parents wouldn't ask one child to sacrifice her comfort and her own sanctuary for the other, especially not in her own home. Chloe burst into tears, the dramatic, heaving sobs of a seasoned actress. You see, she wailed, turning to our parents. She hates me. She's always been jealous of me. That's enough, my mother snapped, rushing to Chloe's side to comfort her. She glared at me over Chloe's shoulder, her eyes filled with venom. I don't know what's gotten into you, Amelia. You've become so hard and ungrateful. This is about family, about what's fair. And it's not fair that you have the best room when Chloe is the one who truly needs it. The word fair was the final straw. It was the word that had haunted my entire childhood. It wasn't fair that I had to do extra chores while Chloe practiced her ballet. It wasn't fair that I had to use my part-time job money to buy my first car while they paid for Chloe's. It wasn't fair that my straight A's were just expected while her C average was her best effort. Their definition of fair had always been skewed in Chloe's favor. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, not with anger anymore, but with a sudden, chilling clarity. They would never change. They would never see me as anything more than a utility. They didn't love me. They loved what I could provide. This proposition wasn't just about a room. It was about respect. And they had just shown me in the clearest terms possible that they had none for me. This conversation is over, I said, my voice ice cold. I turned and walked out of the kitchen, away from Chloe's fake tears and my parents' furious glares. I went up to my master bedroom, my sanctuary, and locked the door. As I sat on my bed, the silence of the room felt different. It was no longer peaceful. It was the quiet before a storm. The proposition had broken something inside me, my hope, my patience, my naive belief that one day they would finally see me. Now I saw them for exactly who they were, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that they could not stay here. The atmosphere in the house after the proposition was thick with a toxic, unspoken tension. My family treated me like a villain. My mother gave me the silent treatment, communicating only through passive-aggressive sighs and the loud slamming of kitchen cabinets. My father would grunt in my direction, but refused to make eye contact. Chloe stayed in her room, emerging only to grab food, her face a mask of wounded tragedy. They were trying to punish me with their disapproval, to make me feel so guilty that I would cave. But they had miscalculated. The proposition hadn't made me feel guilty, it had made me feel awake. For the first time, I started paying attention not just to what they did, but to what they said when they thought I wasn't listening. My work as a data analyst had trained me to find patterns in noise, to extract meaning from chaos. I started applying that skill set to my own home. A few days after the big fight, I was working from home, having decided to brave the interruptions to save myself the calm. My bedroom door was slightly ajar. I heard my mother and Chloe talking in the hallway. They were speaking in low voices, but the acoustics of the house carried their words to me. "I just don't understand why she's being such a brat about this," Chloe whispered viciously. "It's just a room." "She's always been selfish, you know that," my mother's voice replied, laced with poison. "She gets it from her father's side of the family. All they care about is money and things." "Well, what are we going to do?" Chloe pressed. "I can't stay in that tiny room forever, and that guy, Steven, is coming to visit next month. I can't have him see me living like this. It's embarrassing." "Steven? I didn't know any Steven." My ears perked up. "Don't you worry," my mom said in a soothing tone. "Your father and I have been talking. We just need to be patient. Once she calms down, we'll talk to her again. We just have to make her see that this is the best solution for everyone." "But what if she doesn't?" Chloe whined. "Then we'll have to consider other options," my mom said, her voice dropping lower. "Your father thinks we might be able to persuade her. Legally." Legally, a cold dread washed over me. What could they possibly mean? Were they planning to sue me? For what? The right to my master bedroom? The idea was so absurd it was almost laughable, but the conviction in my mother's voice terrified me. They were not just entitled, they were delusional. That conversation was a red flag, but the discovery that truly opened my eyes came a week later. I was looking for a postage stamp in the drawer of the little desk in the entryway, the one my mother had commandeered for her mail and bills. Tucked underneath a stack of envelopes, I found a pamphlet for a local retirement community. It was a nice one, a place I had once idly researched for them, but they had dismissed it as too expensive. Curious, I opened it. Inside, tucked into the folds, was a handwritten sheet of paper. It was a crude budget, written in my father's blocky handwriting. It listed their minimal Social Security income and a few small expenses. At the bottom, there was a section titled Amelia's Contribution. It listed mortgage, utilities, property tax, and then a line that made my blood run cold. Monthly stipend, $1,500. They weren't just planning on living here for free. They were planning on me paying them an allowance that was never discussed, never agreed to, never even mentioned to me. They had a secret financial plan for my life, a plan where I was not just their landlord but their personal bank. I felt dizzy. I sat down on the stairs, the pamphlet shaking in my hand. It all started to click into place. Their half-hearted job searches, their complete lack of any discussion about a timeline for moving out, the proposition. It wasn't just about getting Chloe a bigger room. It was about establishing dominance. It was about solidifying their position in the house, making it clear that their needs and wants were the priority. The master bedroom was phase 1. The stipend was phase 2. They were slowly, methodically, trying to take over my entire life. The broken promises were everywhere. The promise to contribute to groceries. The promise that this was temporary. The implicit promise that they were grateful. It was all a lie. They saw my generosity as a weakness to be exploited. They saw my hard-earned success not as something to be proud of, but as a resource to be plundered. I went back upstairs to my room, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. I felt like a fool. I had opened my home to them out of love and obligation, and they had seen it as an opportunity. The whispers I'd overheard, the hidden budget, it was all the evidence I needed. This wasn't a family living in a temporary crisis. This was a calculated, long-term takeover. The hurt was immense, a deep, aching wound. But beneath the hurt, a new feeling was taking root, a cold, hard resolve. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had underestimated me my entire life. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The game had changed. They had their secret plans. Now I would have mine. My grief was hardening into anger, and my anger was sharpening into a plan. I was no longer just a daughter or a sister. I was a homeowner protecting her investment and a woman reclaiming her life. And I knew my first step was to move from listening in the hallways to formal investigation. My analyst brain took over. Emotion was a liability, data was truth. My family had presented me with a problem, and I was going to solve it with the same methodical precision I used at my job. The objective: gather indisputable evidence of their intentions and financial manipulations to build an unshakable case for their removal. My project, codenamed Operation Sanctuary, was officially underway. The first step was a deep dive into my own finances. I spent an entire weekend locked in my room, poring over bank statements and credit card bills from the last 5 months. I exported everything into a spreadsheet, categorizing every single expense. The results were horrifying. My grocery bill had not just tripled, it had quadrupled. I cross-referenced the itemized receipts I had saved with my credit card statements. The amount of money spent on their specific requests, premium cuts of meat for my dad, expensive organic brands for my mom, countless bottles of Chloe's favorite $8 kombucha, was staggering. My own simple shopping list was a drop in the ocean. The contribution they made, usually a $20 bill left on the counter once every few weeks, covered less than 5% of the total food cost. Then there were the utilities. The water bill had doubled. Chloe's hour-long showers and my mother's insistence on running the dishwasher when it was only half full were literally draining my bank account. The electricity bill was up by 60%, thanks to my dad's all-day television marathons and the multiple TVs and devices running constantly. I created charts and graphs, visualizing the financial hemorrhage. The upward trend lines of my expenses since their arrival were steep and undeniable. This wasn't just helping out, this was exploitation, pure and simple. This spreadsheet, filled with hard numbers and cold facts, became the cornerstone of my case. It was proof that their presence was not just an emotional burden, but a significant and unsustainable financial one. Next, I turned my attention to them. I needed to understand their financial situation beyond the "we have nothing" narrative they had sold me. This felt like a gross invasion of privacy, but their secret budget and legal threats had dissolved any guilt I might have felt. This was self-preservation. My father had left his work laptop on the dining table. It was an old habit from his job. He rarely used it, but it was there. One evening, after they had all gone to bed, I turned it on. I felt a pang of unease, but I pushed it down. I wasn't looking for personal secrets. I was looking for financial truths. I didn't need a password. He had never bothered to set one. I started with his email. I searched for keywords: pension, severance, 401k, application. What I found made my jaw drop. My father's forced early retirement came with a severance package. It wasn't a golden parachute by any means, but it was a lump sum of $40,000. It had been deposited into his bank account 6 months ago, just before he called me in a panic. He also had a 401k. He hadn't rolled it over or cashed it out, but it was there, a nest egg of over $150,000. They weren't broke. They were liars. They had a safety net. A significant one. They didn't have to move in with me. They chose to. They chose to live off me, to drain my resources, while their own money sat safely in the bank, presumably waiting for them to use once they had established their comfortable, rent-free, bill-free life in my house. The anger I felt was so intense it was clarifying. This was premeditated. The "we have nowhere to go" story was a calculated manipulation to prey on my sense of duty. The final piece of the puzzle was the legal threat. "Your father thinks we might be able to persuade her. Legally." My mother's words echoed in my head. I decided I needed to get ahead of whatever insane plan they were concocting. I booked a consultation with a real estate lawyer. I took a day off work and went to a firm in the city. I sat in a polished conference room across from a sharp woman named Ms. Davis. I laid out the entire story, starting from the day they moved in. I showed her my spreadsheets, the charts, the printout of the hidden budget I'd found, and I told her about the severance pay I had discovered. I didn't tell her how I found out, only that I knew of its existence. Ms. Davis listened patiently, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she took off her glasses and looked me straight in the eye. "Ms. Miller," she began, her voice calm and firm, "first of all, you need to understand that what you've done for your family is incredibly generous. Do not let them make you feel otherwise." Her validation was like a drink of water in the desert. "Second," she continued, "their legal standing here is non-existent. Since there is no lease agreement and they do not pay you rent, they are considered tenants at will, or more simply, long-term guests. They have no right to any specific room in your house, and they certainly cannot sue you for an allowance. Their persuasion would be laughed out of any courtroom." A wave of relief washed over me. "However," she cautioned, "because they have established residency here for several months, you cannot just throw them out on the street. You must follow the proper legal procedure for eviction. This involves serving them with a formal, written notice to quit. In this state, for tenants at will, you are required to give 30 days notice." She explained the process in detail. I would need to have them formally served with the notice. If they didn't leave by the deadline, I would then file an unlawful detainer lawsuit, and a court date would be set. It was a formal, intimidating process, but it was the correct and legal way to do it. It was ironclad. "My advice," Ms. Davis concluded, "is to get all your ducks in a row, document everything. Keep your financial records organized. And when you are ready, we will draft the notice and have it served. Do not give them any warning. Do not argue with them about it. Let the legal notice do the talking." I left her office feeling empowered. The money trail I had followed had led me directly to the truth. They weren't victims, they were perpetrators of a calculated deception. The law was on my side. Operation Sanctuary was moving into its next phase. I was no longer just gathering data. I was preparing for action. The 30 days of my lawyer-advised, quiet period before serving the notice were the most surreal of my life. I had to live in the same house with the people I was planning to evict, acting as if nothing was wrong. It was a masterclass in emotional compartmentalization. On the outside, I was Amelia, the quiet, accommodating daughter. On the inside, I was a general planning a strategic campaign. My first move was to secure my assets and information. I changed the password on my laptop and my phone. I bought a small, locking file box for my room where I kept the financial spreadsheets, the copy of my parents' secret budget, and Ms. Davis's contact information. I started paying for groceries with cash and keeping the receipts in that box, creating a clear paper trail that was separate from my bank statements. I was building a fortress of evidence. My second move was to create a financial buffer. I knew the eviction process could have unforeseen costs, and more importantly, I wanted to be ready for the emotional fallout. I cut back on all non-essential personal spending and began transferring a significant portion of each paycheck into a separate savings account labeled Freedom Fund. Watching that balance grow gave me a tangible sense of progress. Every dollar was a brick in the new wall I was building around my life. During this time, my family's behavior only served to reinforce my decision. They seemed to have interpreted my quietness as a sign of submission, a cooling-off period before I would inevitably see things their way. Their sense of entitlement actually grew bolder. One evening, I came home from work to find Chloe in the kitchen, excitedly talking on the phone. "Oh, it's going to be amazing, Stephen," she chirped. "The room is huge. It has its own bathroom and a walk-in closet. My sister is finally being reasonable about it. I should be able to move in there in a couple of weeks. I froze in the doorway, my keys still in my hand. She was already promising my bedroom to her mysterious boyfriend. She hadn't even asked me again, she had just decided it was a done deal. The sheer arrogance was breathtaking. I didn't say a word. I just walked past her, went to my room, and locked the door. I made a note of the conversation, dating it precisely. More evidence for the file. A few days later, my father approached me while I was making tea. "Amelia," he said, trying for a friendly, man-to-man tone. "Your mother and I were looking at the monthly budget. Things are tight, you know." He paused, waiting for me to respond. I just looked at him, my face a blank slate. "We were thinking," he continued, "that it would be a great help if you could maybe set up a small automatic transfer to our account each month, just to help with our personal expenses. Say, $1,500. You're doing so well, you'd hardly even notice it." It was the exact figure from their hidden budget. They were now brazenly asking for the stipend. I looked him dead in the eye. "No, Dad, I will not be doing that." His face hardened. "It's the least you could do, Amelia. We're your parents." "I am already doing the most I can do," I said, my voice flat and even. "I am providing you all with a place to live, free of charge. I will not be providing a salary as well." I turned and carried my tea back to my room, leaving him fuming in the kitchen. This was the final confirmation. They felt they had a right not only to my home, but to my income. The line had to be drawn, and not in sand, but in concrete. The day came to enact the plan. I had arranged for a professional process server, recommended by Ms. Davis, to deliver the notices. It was a Tuesday. I chose a Tuesday because it was an ordinary day, a day where they would least expect their world to be turned upside down. I went to work at the office that day, unable to bear being in the house. At 10:00 a.m., I received a text from Ms. Davis. "Service is complete. All 3 individuals were served personally at 9:45 a.m. The clock starts now. Do know. T. Engage. Refer all communication to my office." I sat at my desk, staring at the screen. A wave of nausea, fear, and exhilarating relief washed over me all at once. It was done. The line was drawn. There was no going back. I imagined the scene at the house. A stranger knocking on the door. My mother opening it, expecting a package. The server asking for them by name, Susan, David, and Chloe Miller. The confusion turning to shock as they were handed official legal documents. The dawning horror as they read the words, "Notice to quit and vacate premises." I had instructed the server to provide 3 separate envelopes, each containing an identical notice. One for my parents as a unit, and one specifically for Chloe. I wanted her to understand that she was not a dependent child in this situation. She was an adult tenant at will, and her right to stay here was being terminated just like theirs. The rest of the day was a blur. My phone started buzzing incessantly around 10:01 a.m. First, my mother. I ignored it. Then my father. Ignored. Then Chloe. A string of increasingly frantic and angry text messages began to flood my screen. "What is this?" "Amelia, call me right now. This is not funny." "Mom is crying. You are a horrible person." "You can't do this to us. We have rights." "Lawyer UP, AMELIA. Dad is calling his lawyer." I read them, my hands trembling slightly, but I did not reply. I forwarded screenshots of the most threatening texts to Ms. Davis, just as she had instructed. She replied with a simple, "Noted. Stay the course." That night I didn't go home. I couldn't. I had packed an overnight bag that morning and booked a hotel room near my office. I needed space to breathe, to let the first shockwave pass without me being in the house. I ordered room service, took a long, hot bath, and tried to quiet my racing heart. I was terrified of their reaction, of the fight that was to come. But underneath the fear was a foundation of resolve. They had pushed me and pushed me and pushed me. They had plotted and schemed and manipulated. They had drawn their lines all over my life, my home, my finances. Today, I had finally drawn my own, and this one was permanent. The 30 days of the notice period were a war of attrition. I returned home the day after the notices were served, steeling myself for the confrontation. I walked into a house that felt like a pressure cooker. The air was thick with resentment. They weren't speaking to me, but their anger was a physical presence in every room. They were hoping their collective silent fury would break me, that I would rescind the notice out of guilt and a desperate need for peace. But the peace I wanted was one without them in it. Their attempts to fight back were predictable and pathetic. My father did call a lawyer, a free consultation with a personal injury attorney whose online ad promised to fight for you. The attorney, after likely hearing my father's delusional version of events, probably explained the harsh reality of tenant-at-will laws, because the threats of legal action quickly subsided, replaced by a sullen, simmering rage. They tried emotional blackmail. My mother would leave old family photo albums open on the coffee table, a passive-aggressive reminder of happier times. Chloe would have loud, tearful phone calls with friends in the living room, talking about how her cruel, heartless sister was throwing her own family out on the street. I ignored it all. I was a gray rock, offering no emotional reaction for them to latch onto. I went to work, came home, ate in my room, and spoke only when absolutely necessary, in short, polite, unassailable sentences. As the deadline approached, their panic became more palpable. They hadn't packed a single box. I think, on some level, they truly believed I wouldn't go through with it. They thought it was a bluff, a dramatic gesture to get my point across. They couldn't conceive of a world where their needs were not, ultimately, met. The deadline was set for noon on a Thursday. On Wednesday evening, I sent a final group text message, as advised by Ms. Davis. It was my only communication with them in weeks. This is a reminder that the notice to vacate is effective tomorrow, Thursday, at 12:00 p.m. A locksmith will be arriving at 12:01 p.m. to change the locks. Please ensure you have removed all of your belongings from the property by that time. That text message detonated the bomb. My door burst open. My father stood there, his face purple with rage. My mother and Chloe hovered behind him in the hallway. "You are not doing this," he snarled, his voice trembling. I stood up from my desk. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of him. "It's already done, Dad. You have until noon tomorrow." "We are your family," my mother shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "You would make your own mother and father homeless. You would put your sister on the street." "You are not homeless," I said, my voice as LD and hard as steel. "I know about the severance pay, Dad. I know about the 401k. You have money. You have options. You just preferred the option that cost you nothing and cost me everything." The look of pure shock on their faces was something I will never forget. My father's anger deflated, replaced by a slack-jawed disbelief. My mother stopped crying and just stared at me. They were caught. Their primary lie, the foundation of their entire victim narrative, had been exposed. How did you know that?" my father stammered. "It doesn't matter how I know," I said. "What matters is that I do. You lied to me. You manipulated me. You tried to turn my home into your personal retirement fund. You have until noon tomorrow. If any of your belongings are left in this house after that, they will be considered abandoned property and will be disposed of." I closed my bedroom door in their stunned faces and locked it. The meltdown that followed was epic. There was screaming, crying, things being thrown downstairs. I heard Chloe wailing that I had ruined her life. I put on noise-canceling headphones and focused on my work. Their tantrum was not my problem anymore. The next morning, I left for the office at 7 a.m. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to be part of their frantic, last-minute packing. At 11:45 a.m., I left work and drove home. I parked down the street and watched. At 11:58, my dad's truck, messily packed with boxes, furniture, and garbage bags full of clothes, pulled out of my driveway. Chloe's little convertible, also stuffed to the gills, followed right behind it. My mother was in the passenger seat of the truck, her face a mask of stone-cold fury. Chloe didn't even look back. They were gone. At precisely 12:01 p.m., a van with Liberty lock and key on the side pulled up to the curb. The locksmith, a friendly man named George, got out. I walked up the driveway to meet him. "Amelia?" he asked. "That's me," I said, a smile breaking out on my face for the first time in months. "Let's get started." As he worked, drilling out the old locks and fitting the new, shiny ones, the sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It was the sound of security, the sound of boundaries, the sound of my home becoming mine again. He handed me the new set of keys, and they felt heavy and real in my hand. This was it. This was the moment. The day the locks changed was the day my life changed with them. I stepped inside my house and closed the newly secured front door behind me. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was a profound, deeply satisfying sound. I leaned against the door and took a deep breath. The house was silent. Not the tense, angry silence of the past month, but a deep, peaceful, empty silence. It was the sound of my own space. The aftermath of their departure was a mess, both literally and figuratively. They had taken their things in a hurry, leaving behind a trail of debris. The guest room and the small bedroom were disasters. Trash was left on the floor, drawers were hanging open, and there were scrapes on the walls from where they had hastily moved furniture. In the kitchen, the fridge was full of their half-eaten food, left to spoil. It was a final, parting shot of disrespect. I spent the entire weekend cleaning. It wasn't a chore, it was a ritual. I put on my favorite music, threw open all the windows, and purged my house of their presence. I scrubbed floors, spackled walls, and threw out anything that reminded me of them. I filled a dozen garbage bags with the junk they'd left behind and the food they'd abandoned. As I worked, I felt the negative energy that had permeated the house for months slowly dissipating, replaced by the fresh air and sunlight pouring through the windows. When the cleaning was done, I reclaimed my space. I moved my desk and work equipment out of my bedroom and back into the small room, officially christening it my home office again. The guest room I aired out and remade with fresh linens, turning it back into a welcoming space for actual guests, friends I wanted to see, not family I was obligated to house. The silence that I had craved was, at first, a little jarring. I had grown accustomed to the constant noise, the tension, the feeling of being watched. Now the quiet felt vast, but within a few days, that vastness transformed from emptiness into peace. I could read a book in the living room without interruption. I could cook my own healthy food without it being shoved aside. I could sleep with my bedroom door unlocked. I could walk around my own home and feel completely, utterly at ease. The simple joy of it was overwhelming. My finances began to recover almost immediately. My first grocery bill was a quarter of what it had been. My utility usage dropped back down to normal levels. The freedom fund I had built became my future fund. I started investing more, planning for my own retirement, a future secured by my own hard work, not by manipulating someone else. I didn't hear from my family directly. The line of communication had been severed, but news travels. About 2 months after the eviction, I got a call from a well-meaning aunt. She told me my parents and Chloe had rented a small, 2-bedroom apartment in a town about an hour away. They had been forced to use the severance money for the security deposit and first few months' rent. My dad was looking for part-time work, and Chloe had apparently been forced to get a full-time job as a waitress to make ends meet. Her acting dreams put on the back burner by the harsh reality of needing to pay bills. My aunt relayed this information with a tone of sadness, expecting me to feel guilty. I didn't. I felt a sense of detached justice. They weren't homeless. They weren't destitute. They were simply living within their own means for the first time in a long time. They were facing the consequences of their own choices, a lesson I had been forced to learn years ago. Rebuilding my life wasn't just about cleaning my house. It was about cleaning my conscience of a lifetime of undeserved guilt. I had to unlearn the idea that my value was tied to my utility to others. I had to accept that setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's necessary for survival. The relationship with my parents and sister was broken, probably beyond repair, but it was a relationship that had been breaking me for years. Sometimes, the only way to heal is through amputation. Today, my house is my sanctuary again. It's quiet, it's clean, and it's mine. The anger has faded, replaced by a profound sense of peace and self-respect. I learned a hard lesson: you cannot force people to value you. You can only set the price of your own peace and refuse to let anyone else devalue it. I paid a high emotional price to learn that lesson, but in the end, I bought back my freedom. And it's worth more than any house, any family tie, any amount of money. It's priceless.